Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
And let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm your host and your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. I'm going to talk about salary cap swag today. This is the offseason, man. I want you to realize this is when the economics and the financial aspect of football really put into play what it will look like when the season starts. Because my director and I were talking about this. A lot of people focus on the field product, but this is the why the product looks like it does on the field. So the salary cap swag is important, and a lot of teams know what they're doing, and a lot don't. And I'm going to break that down for you today, along with some of the salary cap rules. And also in second down, man, the NFL Combine is going on as we speak. It started on Thursday. And I think there are a lot of ways that these players can control the Combine, whether they're working out at the Combine or not. You may be asking yourself, well, if they're not working out at the Combine, how can they control it? We're just going to have to wait and see. And in my nonsense narrative, never should a team allow what fans think or how fans feel determine the decisions they make for their organization. The time you do that, you're probably going to end up being a fan. And last but not least, there's an elite quarterback in the NFL, in my estimation, that is in very good company and bad company at the same time. All that and more right here on Move the Chains, but you know how we do it. Let's kick it off for first down. All right, salary cap. It's a very important piece. It's the business of the NFL. And again, this is what triggers a whole lot of information, and this is what triggers how teams react during the draft. So let me give you just some pieces of information regarding the salary cap. First off, for 2025, the salary cap is now $279.2 million. Now, why is that important to anybody? Well, because the salary cap in 24 was $255 million. So that's almost a $25 million increase when it comes to what teams can spend on their players this upcoming season. Now, you also have to understand that the NFL wants these teams to spend money because they want them to be competitive, because the team is required to spend at least 89% of their total cap over a 4-year period, right? Now, if you go over the cap, you could be punished through possibly losing of draft picks, having to pay fines, things of that nature. So it's very important that you're able to manage the salary cap. You also have to understand that if a team doesn't spend their full amount of cap space, right? They spend the 89% they're required to spend, but they don't max out their cap space, that can roll over to the next year. Now, you get that done through signing bonuses. You get that done through deferred contracts and backloading a contract of an individual player so you can manipulate the salary cap a little bit more to free up some space for your team. So listen, you have to know whom you're going to pay, but you need to know how much you're going to pay those players, because understanding value is the most important thing when it comes to the salary cap, just like it is when it comes to the draft. So I have this graphic that I want to show you. Now, typically, teams that have the top 10 salary cap space to spend in any given year are teams like the Patriots, teams like the Raiders, teams like the Cardinals, who didn't have good seasons, because a lot of times their players may not be as great or may not be as valued, or they have a large percentage of their team that comes from players that are in their rookie contract, right? So generally, not having a lot of salary cap space means that you had a good team, you're performing pretty well, and vice versa. But in this case, you look at all these teams, man, from the Lions to the Steelers to the Bengals to the Chargers that were in the playoffs, and they still have top 10 salary cap space. So I'm going to talk about 3 of these teams and why it's very imperative that they use the cap space that they have. And before I do that, I want you to realize that the effective cap space is the cap space that you have after you remove the dead money. Because remember, the dead money means that you're paying players who are no longer on your roster, sort of like a buyout clause for coaches, definitely in college football. But I want to start with the Washington Commanders. And I want you to realize that Commanders have about $70 million in cap space. Now, you say, okay, well, there are a lot of teams that have $50 to $70 million in cap space. Why are the Commanders so important? Because they just drafted a rookie quarterback who helped lead them to the conference championship game as a rookie after the team was 4-12 a year ago. So if you were to remove the season the Commanders just had, they would fit the mold of the teams that are bad and have a lot of salary cap space, right? That's what you look for, and that's how you make your team better in the immediate future. But, man, the Commanders, now what they can do is accentuate what they have. They can add on to what they have because they have the most important piece, and that's the quarterback. Now what they can do is try to shore up that defense, because the defense, especially against the run, was horrible this past season. And one of their stalwarts in Jonathan Allen, who's been there since he's been drafted out of Alabama, is a free agent, so they may not re-sign him. So what you want to do is beef up your defense and make sure you get better to go around that rookie quarterback, and you can solidify offensive linemen and offensive weapons for him through the draft as well. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers, quarterback purgatory since Ben Roethlisberger left. And the irony in my estimation is that they're in quarterback purgatory because they let Ben Roethlisberger stay the quarterback too long. They've got a little bit over $50 million in cap space. Matthew Stafford may be traded from the LA Rams. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think you have to be a potential player and going and getting a quarterback, even if it costs you $45 to $50 million, because we know you're a playoff team without one. With one, you can be that much better. And I want to talk about the Bengals. Last but not least, but certainly foremost in this conversation, because the Bengals have already said, in terms of Joe Burrow, he wants Trey Hendrickson, right, Defensive Player of the Year candidate who's phenomenal. He wants T. Higgins, and he wants Jamar Chase all back. I want you to know that the Bengals are in that top 10 of salary cap spending, but they don't like to spend money like that. And it's not just about the money you spend, it's about when you spend the money. When you sign these players can also determine how much of the salary cap space you have moving forward. So if you're the Bengals and you sign T. Higgins to a long-term deal, as well as Jamar Chase, you've already signed Burrow to an extension, and Trey Hendrickson, I don't think you're going to have a lot of money to do anything else on that team. And for everybody that was upset that the Bengals defense wasn't that good, one, I'll tell you, there were defenses, a la the Commanders, that were just as bad, but were still able to get to the playoffs. So now, while Trey Hendrickson helps that side, of course, but you already had him. If you're going to make sure that you spend money on these 3 or 4 players, you're going to have to be great in the draft. And the Bengals haven't shown themselves to be that, because that's what they've tried to do along that offensive line to stop Joe Burrow from being one of the most hit and one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. So I think the Commanders, the Steelers, and the Bengals are 3 teams that I'm keeping my eye on when it comes to how they're allocating their salary cap money, because they've got a lot of it. All right, when we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about the combine and how players need to control the situation even if they're not working out. We'll be back with more Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains. Before I get into second down and talking about the NFL Combine, I want to first take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for being able to host Move the Chains. It is truly a blessing, and I feel very favored for this opportunity. Secondly, I want to thank the fans. There's not a day that I go by, whether it's on social media, on TikTok, on Facebook, or whether I'm out and about in the community, where somebody doesn't mention the show or provide some type of feedback or positive comment. I truly appreciate the following on YouTube as well regarding Move the Chains. So shout out to the best fans in the world. And lastly, my production crew, man, let me tell you something. So this week in the show, I sent my producer, Josiah, what I wanted to talk about. And then as we were going to shoot less than 24 hours before we're getting the show done, he's able to make changes that I wanted, because I said I had an epiphany. I want to do it from this angle. And there was no issue. That's the type of grind that the guys in the back have. So shout out to my production crew when it comes to Ernest and Josiah and JJ and Alex that handle the social media side of it. Couldn't ask for a better team. All right, having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for second down. All right, so the combine. The combine is so intriguing to me, because teams get so enamored with the combine. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. Right? But players need to learn how to control the combine, but so do organizations. I'm just going to give you a quick example before I get to the players in this year's draft. Zach Wilson, right? Jets fell in love with Zach Wilson at the combine. He was throwing the ball 65, 70 yards down the field in shorts and a shirt, and they loved it, and they ended up drafting him, and it didn't work out well. Now, I won't put all that on Zach Wilson, because the Jets haven't had a quarterback play well for their organization for a number of years, whether it was Sam Darnold drafted, whether it was Zach Wilson, like I said, or even whether it was Aaron Rodgers via free agency. The point I'm making is the combine has to be viewed as the most important opportunity for a player and for a team to identify said player that they want. So there are some players coming up in this year's draft that are not even going to work out at the combine. And the reason I say that, so now you may ask yourself, well, if I'm talking about controlling the combine, how are you going to control it if you can't work out at the combine? Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter is probably a top 2 or 3 pick in a lot of people's minds, even as a defensive end. Now, if he doesn't go top 2 or 3, it will be because the team needed a quarterback or a guy like Travis Hunter, right? But Abdul Carter, in a lot of people's minds, is the number 1 player on the board, currently has a foot injury. But he's not going to work out at the combine, but he's going to work out at his pro day. But why does he have that flexibility? Because he's shown so much on film that people understand how great he is. Now, while you're at the combine, you need to understand how to talk to these organizations, how to handle the media, how to make sure that you're not able to get distracted and make sure people don't get you off your game. Travis Hunter's the same way. I saw a clip the other day where Travis Hunter was being interviewed, and at the same time there was another player in the combine being interviewed. I lied to you not. There was literally one reporter interviewing this other young man, and the other 99% were interviewing Travis Hunter. That's the type of media scrutiny that you're going to have to take advantage of if you're Travis Hunter, and you're going to have to be able to monitor. Because this is what I want to say about Travis Hunter as well as he goes into the draft with the combine. Travis Hunter is going to do something that a lot of people don't do, that many don't do, and that's probably work out on both sides, right, as a DB and as a receiver. And I want to be mindful of this, and I want you to listen to me, and I'm talking directly to my director about this as well. Mark my words, this versatility for Travis Hunter will be one of the greatest assets you've ever seen in the NFL, but I think it will pose one of the greatest problems because when time comes for him to get his contract, if a team wants to franchise tag him, remember as a franchise tag, you get the average of the top 5 players at your position. What if Travis Hunter plays more defense than he does offense, but receivers at that time, if you're tagged as a receiver, get more money than defensive backs do? Travis Hunter and his camp, I believe it, even though he's a baller and wants to work, will try to have him paid as a wide receiver, and it may cause issue with the team. I'm just saying I think this is an interesting dynamic that I want to think about in the future of what it looks like because he's a dynamic player. And Shedeur Sanders. I said it to my production team before. I think Shedeur Sanders is in that Tom Brady category. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of people undersold how good Tom Brady was coming out of Michigan. And even though Shedeur Sanders is going to be a top 10 pick, presumably, the second quarterback probably off the board after Cam Ward, may before him, right? But I think a lot of people don't look at Shedeur Sanders as a quarterback that can have the longevity and the height and the ceiling in the NFL like maybe a Cam Ward. And I don't care if you think Cam Ward's better. That's fine. I love both of these quarterbacks. I love to see them work out on social media together and push each other to be better. But I think there's something undervalued when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. The leadership that he has, the mindset and the acumen that he has for the game, I think is phenomenal, as well as the pocket presence. So while he may not end up being a Tom Brady 7-time Super Bowl champion, 4 or 5-time MVP, I think people are underselling what he can do. And I think because he's also going to be throwing at his pro day, because he understands the surrounding, he has earned the equity to do that based on what he's done at Jackson State and while he was at Colorado. So this is how, as a player, you control the combine. You may not work out or you may do specific drills, but you've got to control the media and you've got to control how you talk to teams. Go back and watch how Jane Daniels was when he was being interviewed by NFL head coaches and they put him on the whiteboard. They knew they had a stud, and that's what these players are hoping for in their own right. All right, when we come back from the break, it's my nonsense narrative. Fans, you got to love them, but at the same time, you can't trust them to make decisions. I'll talk about that more when we come back from the break on here on Move the Chains right after this. Man, welcome back in to Move the Chains, and it's time for my favorite segment of the show. So let's not delay it, man. It's time for the nonsense narrative. All right, so fans equal decision making. Listening to your fans is not something that you want to do. I'm just putting it there for you, and you'll see my lower third come up shortly. I want to go to the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, right? I know the Packers got rid of Aaron Rodgers 2 or 3 years ago, but I want you to know that when he was there, they drafted Jordan Love, and Aaron Rodgers was upset about it. I think there were a lot of fans upset, mostly because Aaron Rodgers was upset. And I want you to realize this. Now, the fans in Green Bay are unlike any other fan base in football because they literally own the Packers, right? This is a publicly traded NFL team. This is the only NFL team of that ilk. So I want you to realize that, first of all. Second of all, the Packers have done what they always do at the quarterback position. The Packers at the quarterback position are like the Steelers at the head coaching position. They don't go through them a lot. When they had Brett Favre, they drafted Aaron Rodgers before Brett Favre was gone. They had Aaron Rodgers, they drafted Jordan Love before Aaron Rodgers was gone. And it has paid out for the Packers in that they have Jordan Love, their franchise quarterback, and they've already been to the playoffs 2 straight seasons with Jordan Love. Now I want to get to the Cleveland Browns, and this is really where I'll spend a lot of time on this segment. Myles Garrett was one of the best players, not just defensive ends, not just defensive players, one of the best players in the NFL has demanded a trade from Cleveland. And it's because he feels like they can't win. And if you're the Cleveland Browns and Andrew Berry, who's the GM, who's already said he's unmovable. I can't move Myles Garrett. I don't want to move him because he's that big to our franchise. This is what I'll say. The reason that Myles Garrett wants to be gone is because the purgatory that you're in at quarterback and you're not able to get out of it financially at this point in time, so it's hamstringing your team. The Cleveland Browns are not a bad team, guys. The Cleveland Browns are in a bad situation. I promise you. This is a team that's been in the playoffs, just the year before last, in the 2023 season. This isn't a bad team, but they're in a bad situation. So what I want to say regarding this is, before Deshaun Watson got there, they were in the playoffs. Trading Myles Garrett, if it means multiple first-round picks, has to be on your radar because you will have the opportunity to move forward as an organization. So the fans love Myles Garrett, and I understand why. But you have to always put the benefit of your organization before the benefit of the player. And in this case, it may mean losing one of your franchise cornerstones because of the decisions you made prior to this. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be the final drive. There's an elite quarterback who's in good and bad company at the same time. What does that mean? You got to stick around to find out. More Move the Chains right after this. Hey, welcome back into the show. Now, this is the final segment of Move the Chains, so you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. Listen, Lamar Jackson is in good and bad company at the same time. An elite quarterback. Do you know he's one of only 8 quarterbacks that have 3 first-team All-Pro selections? Tom Brady's on that list. Aaron Rodgers is on that list. Joe Montana's on it. So listen, Patrick Mahomes, who I think is the 2nd or 3rd greatest quarterback ever, is not even on that list. But Dan Marino is also on that list. But Dan Marino and Lamar Jackson are the only 2 of that list of 8 that don't have a Super Bowl. So if you're Lamar Jackson, having Dan Marino's career is phenomenal. But you're on the precipice or the cusp of being one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. That's why it's imperative that Lamar Jackson is able to win the Super Bowl for the Baltimore Ravens. All right, don't forget, you can not only catch Move the Chains right here on the Sports Leader, WXTX, Fox 54. You can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe. It's at @move_the_chains. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like, leave a comment, and also check us out on TikTok and Facebook as well. Hey, another banger. It's the off season, which means it's the best season. For the best production crew in the business, for the best social media team in the business, I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers, and as always here on Move the Chains. God bless.